Greetings, everyone. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Our focus of show today is on the fact that Tesla stock price is suffering as we're seeing competing Chinese manufacturers suffer and head towards bankruptcy. Note the hat. I also found it interesting that this truck behind us is carrying a lone, beautiful white BMW, and given that in China BMW sells more cars there than anywhere else in the world, it's sort of apropos that we're bringing up the whole issue of Tesla and China's success. So unfortunately, as I was putting our show together, the rain has hit, so I'm having to do the quick switch back into the car as a way to address what's going on with the rain. So my apologies for that. I think we need a little bit of a camera cleanup here. All right, I think that's better. So, Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. I will admit that I'm a BMW fanatic and really enjoyed ownership of an M3, and all the visits to BMW US headquarters have always been great. They were treated me very well, and I like the company despite the fact that they're suffering mightily as we see the transition in sales. We're in the Washington DC area, as you know, and it's been kind of crazy here in that there's almost been no rain in September, and somehow with no rain for a whole month, I managed to start a show when the rain actually started. So what we wanted to focus on today is that Tesla stock price is kind of declining when in theory it should be rising. The theory on its rising is associated with the fact that the new gigafactory in China is about to happen. So the first part of our show, we're going to be focused on kind of what's going on with China and Shanghai development for Tesla. Number two, how and why things are going currently. And it's kind of, we think it's kind of an interesting what's going on there and worth the time to take a look, especially with the new Tesla vehicles about to start rolling out of the factory. The third thing we take a look, so there's a nest of issues going on there, and there's also new news where Elon Musk announced that they're actually building engineering teams there that will impact structure of that factory and other Tesla factories as well. And this sort of dives into all that discussion everyone's having about transferring knowledge to competing countries and places like China. So what I'm wanting to focus on today is the fact that there's a company called NIO, and NIO is repeatedly referenced as the Tesla of China, and I consistently keep hearing that comment. I'm trying to do a little power here because we're a little bit light on battery. Okay, there we go. So I've never understood why they reference NIO as the Tesla of China for numerous reasons. Number one, the company, I believe, is 5 years old. Number two, over that period, they have $5 billion in losses, including a $400 million loss recently. And they've been forced to slash employment by 1,000 people in an effort to survive. One of the reasons why they're suffering so mightily is that, or all the EVs for China are suffering because China has begun a process where they're starting to reduce the subsidies that are provided to the EV companies, both direct cash as well as incentives for consumers to buy those cars. So one of the reasons we were rooting for Tesla to successfully get open before all these subsidies are gone is that it further makes the economic case for Tesla being an excellent deal if the Chinese government is throwing in 10, 15K per car, and therefore you have more sales. So I guess one of the interesting elements of having a rich uncle like China is, on one hand, they have a lot of money, they also have a lot of resources, and they plan on very long-term horizons. And as they plan and execute in this fashion, they're willing to put up large amounts of capital in order to sort of make their dreams come true. And so in the case of NIO, the company went public in New York, and based on the decline in available resources coming from the Chinese government, you've seen that company go from being worth billions of dollars to being on the verge of bankruptcy, because the basis of their stock price was how those subsidies were impacting sales revenue, profitability for all the Chinese manufacturers of EVs. So the whole pot that's stewing of what China is trying to accomplish and how they're going to do it is sort of an interesting, like, what are you guys doing? So for example, the initiatives they forwarded when it came to electric vehicles, has had some, what you'd have to say, are pretty amazing results. 90% of the electric buses in the world are in China. At the apex of their help EV companies get going, China was seeing as many as 63 companies, one or two in every major city in China, that jumped into the whole EV business using mostly Tesla patents to do their startup efforts, and then leveraging access to batteries from places like BYD, etc. The interesting note here is that, according to a lot that we've read, it suggests that China has been working hard to make a dent in the auto business for a long time, but it kind of got outflanked when it came to the main auto business. So they elected to sort of keep domestic manufacturers going and protect them, while at the same time recognizing that the overall quality of vehicles produced really wasn't world-class and therefore did not make them competitive. So this is an interesting phenomenon because at the end of the day, you have to say, or what the articles are suggesting is, what China's goal is to use EVs and the growth of that field as a way to finally make a dent in the global auto market. And will this happen? Stay tuned. We don't know the answer to that, but it's clear that China is making an effort to really make a dent in this area. Now, as you all know, there's a whole bunch of reasons why China loves EVs. Number one, they're trying to reduce pollution. Even though they're producing most of their electricity from coal right now, it still reduces pollution to switch to EVs. Two, they also are looking to grow a domestic auto business that could be globally competitive, and having Tesla as a partner could be a big part of that. We could go on for other reasons why the Chinese want to be a factor in EVs, but I think those are sort of the top two, and there's a whole list that we could draw on from there. Now, what's fascinating here is that basically NIO is on the verge of bankruptcy. Before the large loss was announced by NIO, we've been developing a show, and the title of it was, the general theme was the fact that there's a really strange statistic out there that I think all of you will find if you just looked it up. And that is that up until a few months ago, Tesla was facing a 6-month to a year-long backlog of people trying to buy, the Model S and X. And that left me scratching my head like, wait a second. In the United States and Europe, people are switching to the 3 away from the X. And how is it that China has a 6-month to a year-long backlog for that vehicle, and we're not seeing huge numbers of those vehicles being made and shipped to China versus what all the data says, which is Tesla's we've been focused on building and selling Model 3s at the lowest profit margins, leaving a lot of batteries from Panasonic that would be used for the S and X unused. So we think it's interesting. We haven't had any recent updates on what the backlog is for those vehicles, but I think the biggest hint of why they've enjoyed such demand is that the middle class for China is the size of the US population, and they're wealthy. And for people who are dealing with pollution issues, EVs are what China wants to move their population towards. But there's this phenomenon going on where there's something called biohazard mode, and Tesla has sort of the best method for filtering polluted air, and EVs are given preferential treatment when it comes to getting access to licenses. So you have a blend of issues happening that make it an excellent choice for wealthy Chinese to go towards Tesla and buy those cars. And speaking of that mix of reasons why there would be more buyers for the Model S and X, you know, I was kind of surprised because obviously with the tariffs, you're paying 40-50% more than you would in the United States for the same vehicle. So the assumption would be people wouldn't be on that long waiting list because it's an expensive car. So this also brings up the question, the suggestion has been made that there's actually a large backlog of folks waiting for the Model 3, which is good, but it's kind of weird because one of the biggest value propositions we see for Tesla in China is the biohazard methods used in the X and S, but the 3 does not offer those features. And so, yes, Josh, exactly to my point, which is, man, it's amazing how much demand there is for the Model 3 in light of the fact that it doesn't have the biohazard capabilities. And so, excuse me, I'm battling a little bit of a spring cold. Do not sit in front of your fan. Let it blow on you if it's hot. So, you know, where we're circulating right now is in the discussion of, now wait a second, the market is saying if sales are so strong for EVs, driven by government subsidies in China, why is it that their manufacturers are going out of business in large numbers, and even the existing ones are on the verge of bankruptcy? And so the answer that pops up is the fact that it's one thing to subsidize companies into existence. It's another thing to allow them sort of sit in an open marketplace and compete well against other great products. And clearly, one of the sort of lurking issues there is that consumers who previously were stuck buying sort of substandard range vehicles, 100-mile range vehicles when they need 200 to 300 miles, will now soon have a choice. So part of what we're seeing happen was a consumer transition where they're saying, why should we make an effort to purchase vehicles from Chinese manufacturers when we're on the verge of getting large numbers of Teslas available at an excellent price comparable to what we would spend on domestic makes. So that said, we think part of the reason for NIO's struggles and the struggles for other companies is now that Tesla's going to enter at a competing domestic manufacturing price and then be everywhere. A lot of consumers are actually stepping back from what everybody knows is a less quality solution offered by new to the auto industry and new to EV companies that are using Tesla technology to sort of enter the marketplace. So as we see both the production and the start of sales happen over the next 45 days, there are a number of questions that will be answered. by the nature of the response and the number of vehicles that show up. I find it interesting that Tesla hasn't announced what the pre-orders look like, and they're now discussing delivery numbers and dates for consumers, and we're not getting a look at any of those numbers. But I think at the next earnings announcement, we're going to get a sniff of that and expect some, you know, big movement. I think it's up, but it could be negative. Who knows? We'll see once it comes out. But we think there's a very positive bias for the company based on the fact that they're going to have exposure to Chinese manufacturing costs, and they'll be able to implement the sales of those vehicles, be it China, US, or Europe, or I guess not US because of the tariffs, but Europe and China sales for Tesla, leveraging the cost reductions of the Chinese factory, I think are going to be really interesting. So, bottom line is that, you know, there's something called sympathy investing. So when one company in the industry is doing badly, i.e. NIO in China, the stock prices of competing firms in a similar industry may decline. It's our feeling that Tesla will take at least 50% market share in China once it starts manufacturing. But if you look at what happened in the United States and even in Europe, don't be surprised if Tesla's market share jumps to 70-75% for the foreseeable future until competing entities can deliver solutions that are comparable. And I think that's a 2 to 3 year window. So, you know, I think it's a fascinating circumstance. We kind of look forward to what's happened. And we look forward to the answer to the question, what's the reality? Is the quality of the product so well regarded that there is in fact a 6 to 12 month waiting list, while competing firms are seeing declining sales, and they really didn't have a very high quality product previously, were kind of protected by the low prices associated with government subsidies, and that consumers weren't thrilled, but were kind of doing it because it was cheap, and therefore they took the solution, tried it, and it's one thing to try it one time, it's another thing to keep buying that solution, and what we're seeing is that consumers are not continuing to buy. So we will look forward to the answer to these questions going forward. It's going to impact a lot of people, including our friends at BMW, what Tesla does in China, but we think the numbers are going to be awesome, and we look forward to sort of what the outcome is there. One of our friends just mentioned that CNBC had another Tesla negative bias story. Both the Wall Street Journal and CNBC seem to be getting paid by, you know, the oil companies or big supporters or advertisers to find and really hyper focus on bad things happening at Tesla. I will admit that there is one element of this whole discussion that you guys might read on. I'm not going to say anything about it, but it points out that the auditors for Tesla went and looked at SolarCity 6 months after the purchase and found that it was insolvent. So the $2.6 billion paid benefited Elon and many of his friends, but after careful consideration, they realized that the company was insolvent, and therefore all that debt that was taken on, as well as the purchase price costs, just resulted in more that Tesla's success has to sort of dig out of, and it seems to be working. So, you know, I guess you can't argue with it, but hopefully SolarCity gets back on its feet and start doing well, despite the getting sued for real performance numbers that we're seeing. At any rate, this show kind of didn't happen as we planned. We're working on some improvements in sound and lighting, etc. We look forward to bringing those forward in the very near future. If you have any ideas, suggestions about the realistic performance of Tesla and its ability to deliver on the China miracle and then have that spread throughout the company, we actually look forward to your comments in that space and others. Just a reminder, don't eat within 2 hours to go to bed, preferably 4 hours, let it digest. And don't forget your 20 leg lifts a day for each leg to strengthen the quad muscles and therefore reduce the chance that you'll need some kind of an operation going forward. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Please remember to like and subscribe. You could use your support on Patreon, and wanted to thank those of you who are already doing so. At any rate, have a great day for now. We look forward to our next conversation, and we also look forward to your suggestions on topics we might consider covering. Have a great day, and thanks for enduring my cold-driven show here, but we're on the mend. Have a great day. Bye for now, and thanks once again for joining us.